So here, let's have a look at what happens when white doesn't play c4. So in this video, let's have a look at the trompowsky, which is when white places bishop to g5. And this is a really interesting move, and it's quite creative. I can see it being more popular in the future, but I think we've got some good plan here that's white fighting for equality and gives us really nice dynamic positions. So obviously with the King's Union, we're playing g6, right? But here, maybe we're a bit worried that simply going to get our knight taken by the bishop. So if we play g6 now, maybe we're a bit worried about this. But I've learned, and this is how I've always played this line, even when I was a junior as black. And in practice, I've even played this. I mean, I occasionally played the trompowsky back in the day, but one of the reasons I gave it up was that these types of positions, I don't think they're anything good for white. I actually think the bishop pair, this lovely bishop on f8 when it comes into the game, and this bishop on c8, I think we've got fantastic chances. And okay, it says 0.1, but it's really 0.0. And I think practice has shown, if we look at the actual database here, black is scoring really well. And I think this is the sort of reason why this opening isn't played so much by white anymore. So we go back here. There are other moves, but there's no real need to move our knight. So obviously knight e4 is the main line. But there's no reason to go into this because if we're not afraid of having double pawns, and we quite like having the bishop pair, white doesn't really have a threat. So I really think g6 is the way to go here for us. I know there's also an idea we can play d5, and same idea, but I like g6. Now the idea is also that what we can do, if white doesn't take on f6, then we can go into our normal line. So let's say white plays something like c4 here. Then we just play bishop g7. Likewise, if white plays knight f3, so if white plays knight f3 rather than c4, we're going to play bishop g7. Now, if white plays e3, same thing. Basically, every move except maybe knight c3 or knight d2, we're going to play bishop g7. Now, against knight c3, bishop g7 is still fine, but problem with it allows e4, and we go into a sort of perk. So in the next video, I'm going to be showing you what we do against Jabava and Veroslov, which is when they play knight c3 here. So here they'll play this, and they'll threaten e4. And against that, we're probably going to try and just play d5. So after this, we want to play d5. Against anything else other than knight c3 or knight d2, we're just going to play bishop g7, castles, and our thematic plan of the King's Indian, which is going to be castle. So bishop to g7 here, d6, castling, and we're going to push for e5. And then we're going to move this knight out, we're going to push. Very thematic. And if I actually think if white doesn't take on f6 straight away, we're probably even better maybe a lot of times. Unless they transpose to the main line c4, which, bishop g5 is a bit committal here. It will probably transpose to a variation of the King's Indian that we're going to cover later. So after we get into this position, it's really tempting for us to just play bishop g7 and castle, which is perfectly fine, certainly possible, but there's actually an even more advanced plan that I've used to win a few games over the board, and it's recommended by Game Jones in his fantastic chessable course on the King's Indian, and I think it just leaves white not really knowing what to do. And that is, we're going to actually play we're going to actually try and put our bishop on d6 and play a sort of improved variation of one of the lines of the Karakan, actually. So white has two main ideas here. It's going to play e3 or e4 basically, and against both we're going to do pretty similar things. So let's say e3, which is the most popular move according to the Lead Chess player database. It's the most popular move with like 600,000 games compared to e4, and e4 only has like 200,000. So it's the most likely move we're going to play against. But we're also going to have to look at c4, which is probably, I think, the best move for white, maybe. But or e4, which is really committal and actually probably slightly better even for black here. But either way, we got to learn what to do against both. And against e3, we're going to play d5. Now, I must admit, when I first played this g6 line, I didn't go in for this when I was a junior, and I still did fine with with just playing bishop g7 castles. And while it's got perfectly good results, and I think black's perfectly fine here. And if you really, maybe I'll do another video on this line because this is an old line. I remember getting a draw against the Grandmaster when I was a junior in this line as black, and it was great because it gets creative, unusual position. I think you can actually then look to. I think I did in the game. I even went like b6, bishop b7 stuff, and it's just interesting. But I actually think, objectively, d5 is the way to go because essentially we're going to play a bit like one of the main lines of the Caro-Kann, where if you consider e4, c6, d4, d5, knight c3, takes, knight f6, we're actually getting a really nice version of it. We're going to put our bishop on d6, not on g7. That's the main difference to what maybe we were expecting, because normally we play bishop g7, but here we can put our pawn on f5. So we get a pawn on f5, bishop on d6, pawn on c6, bring this other knight to f6, and if white plays passively, and this is what tends to happen, because if we look at white's position here, it's quite hard to see how you break down black here. And it's very easy for whites to just sleepwalk into a really bad position. So let's say white plays a bit passively here. Let's say like, I don't know, knight f3. Well, just go bishop d6. So they play, I don't know, bishop e2. You can see already the engine says minus 0 point, but we can just play either c6 or f5. Let's play f5 here. Castles. And there's actually been quite a lot of games in the database here. And if we can castle, our king is very safe, because I know it seems quite strange. We've got this a bit weak, but the point is that we're the ones with the dark squared bishop long term. So even if I were to magically make this queen on d1, get to h6, we'd still have this bishop and he'd have no dark squared bishop. So it's very unlikely that he's going to ever be able to exploit that. And our king can just come to g7. And this pawn on f5, I actually think is, well, it's been shown to be really nice for black, because it's not only is it stopping e4 long term, but we also look at f4, and we can also use it as a clamp for a kingside attack when we bring our knight on b8 to f6, and then we can put it onto e4. We can even look at pawn storming, which is incredibly fun. And if white's playing passively here, he's gonna just wake up into an almost lost position, and this is very easy for him to do. So let's have a look. Knight d2, knight d7, maybe play something like c3 or c4, c6 maybe, and yeah, this is just really easy to play. We're gonna put our knight on f6, bishop on e6 maybe even, and just get a really nice, like, we're the ones that are slightly better. So I think we can safely say that we're doing well if they play passively. So going back, after d5, obviously they can play a lot better than what we just showed there. And so they really need to play c4. They need to immediately try and take advantage of the fact that, our structure is slightly worse, but they need to do it quite fast, and they need to try and get some sort of concession going, but we're completely fine. So let's have a look. So c4. Best move by far, I think, here. And we've got a nice choice here. I mean, the database wants bishop g7, but there's a much simpler move. Now, if you're thinking c6, then that's very logical. Equal still, and certainly one idea. And if you're going to play that way, just remember bishop d6, castle, bishop e6, f5, knight to f6, and basically play just like we saw previously. However, I actually think here we should take on c4 because in comparison to previous line, white might be able to put some pressure on this pawn. So let's say we play c6 here. Knight c3. And if we play something like bishop d6 now, we're dropping on d5. So we just have to be a bit careful this pawn on d5 doesn't end up being taken and then isolated a little bit. So let's say we played, I don't know, bishop e6. We might have a slight issue that this pawn on d5 after, say, takes here, white has a slight edge. You can bring his knight to f4, maybe even queen b3. And, you know, this isn't like, I'm not saying this is better for white. I mean, this specific position actually minus 0.4, but not too much better than for white. It's still very playable, but there's no need to go in for it for us. There's a very simple move here. When white plays c4, we can take it. Now, lots of you might be thinking, what about our structure? Aren't we just giving white nice development after the bishop takes c4? And what's happening with our pawn on f7? But practice has shown after bishop d6, here, we're doing really well. And looking at the database, we're actually scoring, 47% compared to white's 44% on the player Lichess database. And yeah, I mean, we've got the bishop pair. Slightly worse structure, but we're going to play f5 anyway, and we're going to bring our knight to f6, so it doesn't really matter. We're going to castle, we're going to play king g7. So castles, f5, knight to f6, via d7, and often we've just got a really nice position. We're going to play f4 in the middle game, and this double pawn isn't really a double pawn because it's in the early middle game. It's very powerful actually. It both defensively and on the attack, we actually can use it. And the key thing here is our bishop on d6 is unopposed, so there's no worry about this square. Because I know this is a bit scary not to have any protection here, but it doesn't actually matter because we're the ones with the bishop pair. So like worst case scenario, we can bring it back to. We can actually bring it back and to help ourselves. So this is, I think, going to be the key position for us here, because this is the most popular way for white to play. And when top grandmasters have played the trompowsky, so the main player's position has been report, but unfortunately for him, he's had some really bad results for white here. He's lost most of his high-level encounters in this line because it's very hard for white to deal with the fact that these lovely two bishops, I think reports tried bishop b3 here, which is a little unusual. And I think main idea for report is if we castle, maybe he can get h4, h5, or some sort of king-side attack, but we don't have to. We can. We've got a lot of options. I mean, the engine doesn't even mind the attack, but there's no need to allow it. So, I'd be tempted here in this position, and I'm going to recommend it just to play a move like knight d7. Now, this has the benefit, if white ever tries to go for e4, we can go for c5. And it's one of our main ideas is to get our knight to f6 after f5, but we're wanting white to show his hand a little bit, because if white goes h4 here, that's quite committal. So let's say he goes h4, goes for a massive attack. Now we know what his plan is, right? We know his king can't really go castling kingside because our bishop on d6 means that he's going to get checkmated, maybe even if he tries to go kingside now. So we just play h5, and okay, these pawns might look a little bit sus. They might look a little bit loosey goosey, but actually, with the bishop pair, they're actually very strong. They control all the squares. G4 is for the real key one. And I think white's king has struggling to know where he's actually going to go. Is he going to castle queenside maybe? Well, our king has a lot of flexibility and we don't have to castle. So the engine recommends knight f3, but after castles, knight c3. King G7. Yeah, I think most players as white don't want to go into these type of positions because we've got, quite a nice safe edge as black. Well, not maybe not massive edge, but we've got the bishop pair. We've got safe king. I'm not really sure what. This isn't a good position for white. I think practically because I think our plan may play f5, knight f6, or we can play slow. We got a range of plans. I mean, we can even play moves like rook e8, c6, even fight for d5 square by knight b6 or even f6. So yeah, I think this position's nice for black. I think if we get in this position, and I think you will get into this position, I think you'll do well. So let's go back and let's say they don't play bishop c4, sorry, bishop b3. So here, let's say they play the main move, which is knight c3, which is logical, just developing a piece. Now we have plenty of options, right? We can castle, we can play knight d7, we can play f5, we can play c6. You could probably, hopefully, see that we've got this sort of, it's not quite tactical, but I think these sort of positions suit us because it's similar to, if you know the main line of the King's Indian, right? We have long-term plans that are going to explode later, but they're not immediately tactical. That's sort of similar to the trompowsky. This sort of position, we've got a lot of long-term plans with our, f5, knight, getting our knight to f6 from b8, but it's not happening immediately. So here we just take our time, think about the nuances, because your opponent here isn't going to necessarily play a theoretical move. So let's say they don't play knight c3, so they play a move like, I don't know, f3 or something wacky, like knight f3, knight e2, queen somewhere. And I've had this, I have this all the time, so your opponent's likely to as well. So the key to winning these positions is going to be to look at the move your opponent plays. So let's have a look at, I don't know, queen c2 or something like this. And just keep going with our traditional plan. See how it affects our idea of just bring our knight to f6 via f5, c6, and all these ideas. And you'll tend to find that most of white's moves here are quite interchangeable. So it doesn't matter too much on the evaluation what they play, but we're just going to play. So here, let's play knight d7. There's no worries if you play something like c6, but we'll play knight d7 so that if we can meet e4 with c5. So that's e4, c5, and already black's quite a bit better. So in general, we want to meet e4 with c5 because it just breaks up this center and threatens to open everything up for our bishop pair. And white doesn't really want to allow, let's say he plays d5 here. We can just castle, and this square is quite weak. This pawn's quite weak, and yeah, I think we're actually quite a bit better. Even just practically much better, I think. So going back, nothing to worry about if they don't play one of the main moves. After e3, we should still be better. So let's look at the main line again. So with knight c3. This is the most popular move, but it's still only about equal for whites. And we're just going to play knight d7. Again, the idea is if they play e4, we can meet it with c5 immediately. So exact same as before, and we're actually slightly better. If white takes it, not too much of a problem. We can just take back. I mean, you can go bishop takes or knight takes. The engine prefers bishop takes here, but presumably so you can get the e5 square later on. But either way, we're opening it up for our bishop pair long term, and we're actually slightly better. So what does white do here? Well, I'm guessing practically the most popular move is to actually play knight f3. And here we've got a pleasant choice. We can either play castles, c6 or f5. Again, we're just interchangeably deciding those key moves on our middle game plans. I'd recommend refraining from c6 until later, just because we want to meet e4 with c5 immediately whenever we can. So we don't want to end up losing a tempo. The move I like here, just f5, and black scores pretty well here. We're just going to go for knight f6, so we're going to delay castling for a tiny bit. Just so that's the most popular move for them is castle, and then we can castle. So again, we get into this middle game position. And the key point is most of white's moves are interchange, are kind of, there's a lot of options for white. It's not a tactical minefield here. So whether white plays queen c2, queen e2, queen d2, rook c1, rook b1, there's about 10 different moves you can play here from a4, bishop b3, anything really. But you don't have to worry about any of them really. Just we're going to go for the same plan, get our knight to f6, king to g7, rook to e8, and we're just going to go for that middle game, right? And I think we've got a really nice position here. So let's have a look. So queen c2, most popular move. I mean, king g7 or knight f6. Let's say knight f6. I don't know, maybe c1 or d1. King g7. And I think you can see white's kind of struggling to find good moves here. I think a lot of your opponents are going to be like, what do I even try and do here? They'll probably try and get e4 in somehow. That's rarely a good idea for white. So let's say rook e1, c6, e4. You can see immediately minus 0.7. So let's look at why first, so we can get rid of our double pawn. After takes. We just got the bishop pair, right? And this is very common sort of thing to happen. Maybe not this specific move order, but white will struggle to find a plan, and they'll try and lash out with e4 quite fast, and maybe even rook e1 here, go for e4. But we can just do the same sort of thing. It's not a problem. If they don't go for e4, they just try and play for something like, I don't know, so they go for a4, a5, or maybe even go for b4, go for like a push on the queen side. The problem is, I actually think we're going to be faster on the king side. Because we've got these lovely bishop on c8, bishop on d6, and I think we're much faster. So let's have a look at some moves we could maybe try. Let's say we go, I don't know, c6, say b4. Well, b4 actually fails to b5, so stopping all the counterplays. Let's say not that one. Let's say a4. Got plenty of options. Just queen e7 looks nice for us, and I think we're just going to push. Maybe you can get knight e4 in. Yeah, I think these positions are good for us, so we don't really need to go too far into them. I think you can see our plan. We're just going to go for a kingside attack. And the engine approves, thinks we're a tiny bit better, but maybe we're about equal. And if we get in these positions, we tend to be doing well. So what else can white do here to trouble us? I mean, I guess h4, the scary looking move, but we just play h5. Other plans like c6 also work, but after h5, white hasn't got really anything. And we're slightly better, so we got this control of g4. So after g3, maybe play bishop d6, and we're just going to do the same plan: knight d7, f5, knight f6, castles, king g7. So we're completely fine. Other moves here, maybe g3, maybe trying to play for bishop g2. But again, I mean, we've got plenty of options. We can even play h5 here. We're just clamping down on g4. We don't even have to threaten h4. Unless they'll probably have to play h4. And we just sort of transposed to what we looked at before. And we're completely fine there. So you just play bishop d6, knight d7, c6, f5. Same sort of plan. So we can see kind of interchangeable the moves. Because we're just going to play that same sort of ideas. Other ideas, I mean, ideas like f4 are a bit unsound because of e3. So this is going to be like a long-term weakness. We can do the exact same plan, but we can just play like bishop d6, get our knights in. We can just get this lovely clamp, so I don't think that's any good. And all the rest of the ideas kind of transpose to what we've seen before. And nothing too much to worry about there. So I think that's E3 sorted out, which is the most popular move. And you can see it's not much trouble for us. So there's only really one move here that keeps it kind of independent, and it isn't E3 and it isn't C4. And that's going to be to play E4 straight away. So here, this can be quite a scary looking move. So just E4 straight away, and white has the center, but again, we have a wide range of options, but the actual simplest move here is to play D5. And okay, if we want to play a long-term game, we could play bishop G7, castles, and we actually have a slight edge here. But if we just want a simple game, just play D5. And I think black is the one pushing here. White has to really try and play accurately just to hold the balance here. The main point is white kind of has to take. You play something like, say, knight c3. You can probably just take this, and we're quite significantly better. Just castle next. We're just going to have the bishop pair, and we're just going to get lovely. The position's opening up, and this pawn on d4 is going to be very weak to these attacks. So the only move here is to take, and we can take back. Now they play knight c3, which is the most obvious move. Just go bishop b4, hitting it, and these positions are just quite a lot better for black. I mean, we're minus 0.4 here, but so queen e2 obviously doesn't work. Bishop e6. Say plays queen d2. We can take this. Okay, takes. Castle. And okay, it looks a little bit dry, but black has the long-term better position here. d4 is incredibly weak. Got lovely, well-positioned pieces. We can go bishop e6 or bishop f5, knight c6, rook d8, rook e8. It's just very easy to play, I think, here for black compared to white. White already kind of doesn't really know what to do with his king. Our rook's going to come to e8 very fast. If he castles queenside, we're going to take on a2. So yeah, this king looks a little weak, and that's why black's better. So this is quite good for us. So knight c3 is actually not very good. So knight f3 is the only move to hold the balance. And here, we can play knight c6, we can play bishop g7. I'll just say we can play bishop g7, queen e2. And here, quite a lot of players just taking the queens off with queen e6. And this is actually a tiny bit better, but it's probably equal. But most players probably not going to want to take off the queens, but this is actually white's only real way to get into a sort of equalish ending. But this is all like white's playing like the moves he has to play, and we're the ones with completely equal, maybe even slightly better for us sort of position with the bishop pair. So this is nothing for white really. I don't want to swap off queens. So if you're worried about this variation here with the queens coming off, there is another option. We can just go to g7, and it's basically the same sort of thing. We're just going to castle. So let's say knight f3, castles. Bishop d3, d5, and it's the same sort of thing as before, but we're not allowing the queen trade, and I guess it depends if we want the queen trade or not. But again, most of your opponents aren't playing the trompowsky in order to get us, not very nice queenless middle game where they've got two bishops to contend with. So yeah, I mean, I don't think e4 is too much to worry about. So if we just play d5, takes, and if they play passively here, we can play bishop g7 castles. So let's say this. So let's say they play knight c3 or something. And, you know, it's kind of an easy to play position for us. We're going to play c6, knight d7. It's just a matter of taste whether you want to play. We go back a few moves, d5 straight away, or whether we want to play bishop g7 and keep hold of the pieces, because do we want to swap off queens? So quite often this line here with the queen e2 ideas does end up swapping off queens. Maybe we don't want to allow it. It's going to depend on who you're playing and what your mood is. But they tend to be quite similar positions. Just by playing d5, we do kind of allow the queen trade. So maybe bishop g7 straight away is an option. But objectively, this position here is just, you know, completely fine for black. White has nothing, so quite easy to play as well, because we've got these nice bishops. Let's look at c4. Now, for me, this is the most testing move, but it's still only about equal, and it's not the most popular. It's only played about 10% of trompowsky games. We get into this line. E3 and E4 are much more popular, which is good for us. But I think we can just play D5 here. And I think this solves most of our problems. Essentially, we can get transpositions into the E3 line, because we can take on, so let's say they play E3 here. We can take on C4. We've actually just transposed, so we can just play bishop takes C4. We just transpose into what we just looked at with E3. And yeah, it's just a transposition. However, white does have two independent options here. And one of the interesting ones is to play knight c3, with the idea that we take on here, which we will do, to potentially play either e3 or e4 and try and I don't know, create like a dynamic unbalanced position. But I think we're okay. Let's say e4. We'll look at first. And here we've got the key move here. So we have to think a bit outside the box. This is why it's a bit more testing than the other ones, because if we just play our other moves, maybe white can cause us some slight issues. It's nothing too bad, still equal, but the key move here, and that causes white some problems, is knight c6. So we're going to immediately press on this. Now if they go knight f3, we can just bring our bishop to g4. We're doing really well. So we're trying just to win this pawn. So in practice, the only real move here is d5. And after knight e5, I think we're doing well. So if they play something like f4, we got knight d3 potentially as a resource. But as you can see on the engine here, knight g4 is very, very strong. Got this lovely diagonal bishop c5 coming, so can't really get away with f4. So let's say knight f3, again, bishop g4, and knight d3 potentially long term could be a threat. And we're doing well. It's quite thematic. And what's nice here is our bishop on f8 can come out very easily, and as you can see, we're slightly better. So nothing to worry about in this line. So the main move here is to take on c4. And then we can have a pleasant choice. We can move our bishop somewhere. Just make sure we don't play bishop b4 just now, because of queen a4 check. Obviously, we don't want this to lose the bishop, but bishop c5 is an option. Say bishop d6, more in the spirit of our other lines. So let's go for this one. And yeah, I think white isn't got nothing special here, so we're slightly better. Just going to castle, maybe play f5. You know, we're threatening to take the bishop, but we'll probably go bishop e3, so let's say bishop e3. castles, knight f3, bishop g4, so maybe f4 is a better move. But again, I think white's the one trying to hold on here, so probably good for us. Now, let's say white does something like e3 here. And again, we've got that transposition. We can play bishop d6, knight d7. Now here, the main independent idea is to play cd5. So here, and then we're going to take back. And I think this is probably the best way for white to play. Try and take advantage of this queen having tempo lefts, but as we're going to see in the database, black's doing pretty well. And in the Masters database, black scores 35%, white scores 35%. We have a few games. There's Andreiken, grishuk. Grishuk won a nice game. Here is black. Let's say knight c3. That's the main plan. Bishop e4, perfectly fine here, but we can actually do a kind of cute little move, queen d8. And I think this is the way to go here. So after queen d8, it looks like we've just lost a lot of time, but the main point is white has no real things to attack, and we've got the bishop there. We're completely safe, and we have a nice choice. We can go either way, and long term, I think our bishop pair is going to count quite a big deal. So let's have a look at some lines here. So white has a choice. The main move has to be e3 here, because we've seen already that e4 is a bit too exposing for his position with the bishop pair. So we have a nice choice here. We can even go c6, but we can go bishop g7. We're just going to castle, and then we're going to undermine these 2 pawns. So let's say knight f3, castles, bishop out somewhere, let's say b3 or something. And just go like knight c6. I think it's quite easy to play. We don't have to go knight c6 actually. We could just go c6 if we wanted. It's very easy to play here for us. I think we're completely fine. So I don't think many players are going to play e4 here. I think instead the main move they're going to play is either e3 or g3. So g3, key move here to play h5. So g3, the idea is to just basically play e3, bishop g2. So they're going to play e3, bishop g2, knight e2. They're going to try and somehow clamp us, but it doesn't work. So we're just going to play h5. So we're going to try and make them have an unpleasant weakness here. h4, most common move, but not the best for white. So let's say knight f3, knight d7, bishop g2, bishop g7, castles, something like this. You're going to get quite often. And, it's just like a kind of equal-ish middle game. We just can do the same plan with c6 or even f5 if we want. So I say a4, best move, a4, a5, queen c2, knight b6. It's just going to end up like this. And you've got a really nice long-term bishop pair. And he's got quite a solid position as well. He's got this safe king now, the bishop on g2 going along this diagonal. So this is perfectly fine for white as well, but I think we're perfectly good here. And we've got quite an easy to play middle game. Eventually we can play f5. We can look at maybe play c6 first, then f5 and rook e8. Just, slowly, just move our position with our normal middle game plans. So going back, let's say they go e3 instead. Now we can have a choice. Knight d7 looks the most logical for us. Keeping our options open, we can either go this way or this way. h4, h5 could happen. And if he goes this way, we're actually slightly better. So I think in practice, a lot of players here are just going to play moves like knight e2. And we're just going to play our normal plans, right? You're probably sick to death of me showing them, but we can just play this bishop d6, castles, c6 ideas, just like we've seen. The only real testing way of white playing this line is to play that g3 thing we saw. So like this. And we're going to get into something like this. Either go this way, not so great, or this way. Castle. And looks about equal, so it should be fine. So all in all, nothing too much to worry about if we play this g6 line. Just a few variations, just we need to know what to do. And getting the bishop pair is good for us. Let's have a quick look at that c4 line again. And let's have a look at the game between Andreiken and grishuk, because I think that shows us how to handle the position quite well. So these are two players who, I mean, this game was like, 8 or 9 years ago, but that's mainly because players as white have sort of given up trying in this line because black's equalizes quite easily. But Andreiken's a very strong player. He's 27-48 here. So also grishuk with our d5 takes. So it's important that we remember to play d5 here. And we're going to take on c4. If they play e3, or anything really, or knight c3, we're just going to take on c4 wherever they do. So they play g3, we're still going to take on c4. But they're going to take on d5, the only testing line. So grishuk takes on d5 back, just like we want. And after knight c3, queen d8. So remember, that same idea, long-term bishop pair. Even though it looks like white's gained a tempo, we've got the bishop pair and we've got a nice safe position. So e3, logical. c6, that same idea, if you remember, bishop d6. And this idea of just clamping, getting our knight to d7. So this is what we need to remember, right? Because there's a lot of ways white can play different moves, but if we just remember this sort of system of c6, knight d7, get our bishop to d6, castles, f5, we can pretty much play it against a lot of, at least 10 different white moves, and it's equally effective, and we get into a nice position. So we're already minus 0.1 here, which is nothing really, but as black against the 2750 or whatever it is, it's clear that the openings battle has been won by grishuk here. So b4, it's quite a natural looking move, but isn't that great? Knight f6, queen b3, queen e7. And what I quite like about grishuk's moves here is that they're not like spectacular or hard to spot ideas. You can memorize the king g7 idea. We're just developing all our pieces into those same best squares, clamping on e4, and then long term looking for the attack on the king side. So d5. I think white's struggling to find a move here, because white doesn't really have any sort of threats. Let's say we put the engine on here, look at other moves. Let's say b5 doesn't work to knight e4, then you're starting to get into a situation where you're significantly worse. So d5 might even have been best. So took, which is a slight error. Should actually play c5 here. But I don't think it's a massive mistake. It's kind of logical. But yeah, c5 would have been better for grishuk here. After all the exchanges, black's kept the bishop pair, and he's slowly improving his position. And he's got this lovely f4 idea. So f4, we've got control of the e file, so we can't take this pawn. And if g takes, we're going to take on h4. Now, if white does nothing, we're just going to win this pawn on g3 because our bishop's coming. And what I like about this game is you can suddenly see how these two bishops on b8 and c8 suddenly, out of nowhere, controlling the entire board. And white structure looks nice. It looks good, but the bishops are just much more powerful than the nice structure. So that's very much how we're going to win games against Trompowsky with this sort of setup. So takes, and it's already near lost. I mean, I'm just going to push. I mean, okay, he's made a few more errors, but this is already really difficult for white because of these bishops coming on the king here. And yeah, it's just a lovely little tactical finish. But if we go back a few moves, I mean, this sort of position is, nearly impossible to defend. This attack with these two bishops is so strong. And, worst case scenario for black, he can just push this H pawn up. Just, go for checkmate, and it's very difficult. So you saw that really it looked almost effortless win for black there, just for the power of the bishops. Yeah, so I hope that gives an idea of how we're going to handle beating the Trompowsky. And as you can see, it's white that's trying to get equality against us. Just play this G6 move, and hopefully that was helpful. So cheers for watching.